Welcome in to another episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast. The Ducks are in a bit of a recruiting heater, and who better than our good friend and I think pretty frequent podcast guest, 24/7 Sports recruiting analyst Greg Biggins, to talk it through. Greg, been a bit of a good couple of days here for the Ducks. How are you doing?
I'm good. Not as good as Oregon, but I'm doing good. And was ever a doubt, right? You knew they were kind of going to get rolling here pretty soon. I did Kazano show a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, "Hey, should Duck fans be nervous right now? Should Duck fans be worried?" I'm like, "Dude, don't ever worry about Oregon when it comes to recruiting, especially when it's June, right? It's so early, and you knew they're going to close strong, and it's not even closing time, but they're already kind of getting on a little bit of a roll. So it's good to see if you're an Oregon fan.
I think because of the expedited calendar where everybody takes their visits in the middle of summer, I think people start bedwetting season a little too early. People start going like, "Oh no, it's not all in place." And it's like, you have to remind them that signing day is 6 months out still.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've got a lot of time to get this figured out.
No doubt. I mean, the whole football season is going to radically change so much. So where you see things right now, teams that do well will flip kids, and teams that crap the bed are going to lose kids. So right now, again, it sounds so cliche, but these are just verbal commitments. They don't mean anything. And, I think over the next few months, you're going to see radical transformations to all these recruiting commitment lists. So I wouldn't even worry. Never get excited or never get too high or too low right now.
Well, let's start with some things that have the Oregon fan base a little bit high, which is a couple of good days for Leak Terry, Oregon offensive line coach, and flipping. I don't know if it's personal, but it probably felt that way to some California fans. First on Monday, flipping, you might have to help me with the pronunciation, Koloi Keli.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just this morning, we're recording it shortly after Tommy Tofi makes his flip official. He decommitted from Cal on Monday, waited a couple of days, and then picked Oregon Wednesday morning. Just start here. What do you think went down? Like, what was the surprise level for you? Maybe specifically with Tofi, considering was kind of the crown jewel of that California recruiting class. And I know initially he had talked about like, "Hey, I want to stay close to home and kind of build something in my own backyard."
Yeah, no, me, Huff, and Blair were kind of joking around that, this maybe completes the Jaron Chiave Skopil trade, right? Player to be named later was Tofi, and they got Koloi earlier. You mentioned Tofi, his brother signed with Cal last year, and he's a solid player, but I think a lot of people thought, that was partly to try to entice Tommy to stay local and play for the Bears. And then when he committed, it was like, okay, now you kind of see maybe a little package deal with the two brothers. I think Oregon was always the kind of the dream school for Tommy. Knows the Sewell family pretty well. And, ironically, even before he committed to Oregon, this isn't being a lazy comp, but that's kind of been my player comp for Tommy was Penei Sewell. At the same stage in their development, both kind of similar body types, both athletic in terms of having, a 340-pound frame. People don't remember Penei was a big dude in high school, and I thought he was going to be a guard. And then he went to probably the first Polynesian guy I can remember who went to college and lost weight. Usually those guys put on 20 pounds just by breathing. So, but tackle feet, very athletic. I think Tommy has tackle feet. He's got tackle length. We have him penciled in to be a guard. I think he can play tackle. I no doubt believe he can play tackle. He's right side. Maybe even the left side, man. He's got a basketball background. He moves really, really well. Like I say, he's 340 now. If he were to lose 10 to 15 pounds, I think that would help him. But his balance, his length, he's 80-plus wing. He's got the two-way snaps that we love, defensive lineman, offensive lineman. So, again, you see the athleticism kind of pop on both sides. I love that pickup. Tough break for Cal, but, for Oregon, this is a trend-up guy. Last update, I think we put him into our top 100. I see him hopefully continuing to trend up. I think he's going to have a great senior year. So love him. And again, huge pickup for Oregon. You never want to say it's a position of need because they're so stacked everywhere. But when you have a guy who's a potential NFL second, third rounder, man, it's a huge pickup no matter what program you're at.
Yeah, it's funny. I had similar thoughts. I read your guys' reporting on possibly him moving inside, and then I watched the tape. And I think what stood out to me is, as you said, like 340 pounds and like the majority of his clips are like in pass protection. And it's because his feet are so good. His hands are so good. He's like almost impenetrable from a speed rush, which is unusual for a 340 pounder. So I'll be curious to see what this looks like down the line, Greg, of like people talking guard. Could he play tackle? The Penei Sewell comp is obviously going to be really intriguing for Oregon fans just because of what probably the best offensive lineman the school has produced. It's a lofty comparison. I know you're not saying it's one one-to-one necessarily, but an interesting, I guess, comparison, at least in some of the physical traits for sure.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because a lot of times when we do player comps, we're not saying he's going to be a top 10 pick. We're just saying at the same stage in their development, there's similarities in their body structure, their body type, the length, the feet, the balance. So I'm glad you made a point to say, hey, if you comp a player to this player, you're not necessarily he's going to be drafted in the same exact draft slot. You're just saying, hey, a lot of similarities at the same stage in their development.
I make that caveat because I have dealt with that on my own as a much less acclaimed talent evaluator of like, hey, it reminds me of this guy. And then when the player doesn't become a first-round pick in 3 years, everyone's like, you got that one wrong. And I'm like, I was just saying that he reminded me a little bit of
you promised me. You promised me he was going to be picked to say, yeah, no. I comped Troy Hune recently as a Penn State commit to Jared Goff. And people said, oh, so he's going to be the number one pick in the draft? And I'm saying, no. But if you saw Jared Goff in high school, you would never thought he would have been a number one pick, or more or less a first, second, third rounder. But I'm saying body structure, throwing style, mechanically, they are very similar. So I think the same thing with these two.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Koloi Keli then. I'm curious on what you kind of gleaned from his decision to flip. Obviously, he and Iapani Lalalu, Oregon starting center, went to the same high school. I think it sounds like a bit of a relationship there. But like, what do you see with him on tape? Where does he fit? I know he plays some tackle, I think, at Farrington, but probably an inside guy ultimately, right?
Tough kid. Again, me, Huff, and Blair had a chance to go see him last year. During the Polynesian Bowl, there was a couple of Warriors for youth camps that we got a chance to go see, and so that's one of the benefits of going to the Polynesian Bowl is you see a couple of camps while we're out there. All the locals like to try to get their kids some extra exposures, and we're happy to go see him. And he was tremendous. He was the best guy there. And then we saw him again at the Poly Combine. And no, I think he's an interior guy all the way. I think he could be a center or guard. Just Farrington kids, if you know anything about that high school, they're tough. They practice on, used to practice, dirt fields and just, a lot of the kids from Hawaii. Now, ironically, I didn't even know I was wearing a Kahuku shirt. Just the kids on the islands, man, they're built a little bit differently. They're wired a little bit differently. And I would say, when I was growing up, we played tag football or, played wiffle ball. They fight. Like, that's part of their fun. Like, they box and wrestle and fight each other with full on swinging on each other with, blood and all that kind of stuff. They're tough. And that's definitely Keli, man. He's got really strong lower body. Really, just if you look at him close, man, he's very, very strong, a powerful kid. He's got a punch to him. He's got very good feet and balance. Smart, plays for a really good offensive line coach there at Farrington. And I think he's a guy who I think we have rated probably a little bit lower right now. Doesn't have the ideal measurables. And again, for us, I know a lot of Oregon fans always roll their eyes. We use the NFL draft projection, but for us, that's what it is. And so it may not have the ideal length that other guys do, but in terms of being a high school college player, I think he's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, I like the idea of maybe him being another center just to continue the Poncho, Farrington, Oregon center tradition, even though maybe that's not where he lands. Like, that's something that I think the fans on the board were kind of like, oh, that would be intriguing if they could make it two guys in a row from the same school playing that position. Let's just kind of wrap up the offensive line position because I know there might be some movement here coming up. I know Emmanuel Iheanacho's a five-star big-time prospect, not from your part of the country, but certainly a prospect that Oregon seems like they're in good shape with. Aside from him, any other kind of prospects out west on the offensive line? I know Jax Tanner's a name. Kelvin Obot had been. He just committed to Utah on yesterday. What are you thinking about just kind of where this line class might be headed for Oregon? Any names that popped to your head right away when I asked you that?
Yeah, no, I like Jax. We saw him at the Under Armour Utah camp. For me, he's another guy who, I would love to see with a little bit of a bump. I mean, I think he's an NFL player. I think he's a 4-star guy. I think we have him as a high 3 right now. But when we saw him, you see the tape and he's a mauler, right? And then when you see him in person, you realize two things. Number one, he's a lot longer than we thought, and he moves a lot better. Really technically sound kid. Obviously, people will say, oh, the competition there isn't great. I don't really care about that. You're kind of looking at more of the player in terms of how they move around. You look at guys, do they finish? It doesn't matter who they're playing against. They're not tough. They're not finishers. They don't have that dog mentality that you kind of look for. This guy doesn't matter who he's going against. He would be elite if he was playing in Texas, California, Florida, or Georgia. Talking about Jax Tanner. So I think Oregon is definitely one school in the mix. I'd be lying if I said I knew who his leader was. I know there was some buzz for Oregon. There was some buzz for Michigan, a few other schools. Well, I think he'd be a huge pickup. You mentioned Obot. There were a lot of buzz for Oregon just a few months ago. So that was a huge pickup for Utah. I think they potentially could have a couple of first-round picks on the offensive line, Caleb Lomu being one of them in next year's draft. So I think Utah does a nice job developing offensive linemen. So I think that's what Kelvin liked. But Jax Tanner would be a huge pickup, and you kind of package him with what they received this week. I think that's a nice little trio right there for sure.
Let's talk about, because we haven't had you on since the Bryson Beaver commitment. And honestly, I just want to get your take, because I know you've covered him for a little bit. He's in your region. This was somebody who seemingly wasn't on many schools' radar. I know he was a Boise State commit, and then did very well at the Elite 11 regionals. Oregon got involved. A bunch of other schools got involved. He ends up flipping. And it's all kind of came together rather quickly for Oregon. Kind of what can you talk about? Maybe let's start with just the development of what you've seen from his junior year to now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even go prior to his junior year, and I've known the kid since 8th grade, and he is a salt of the earth kid, and I love that about him. He hasn't changed. Talked to him after the Elite 11, and he had the offers. He just came off a great week where he competed at a high level and was as good as everyone there, and he was still the same kid. There was no, he's got a little bit of I don't want to say he's got a chip, because that kind of sounds like cockiness. He's very confident right now, and I've always said this: if you're playing any sport, basketball, baseball, football, especially quarterback, though, confidence is everything. It's 80% of the position. You have to be confident. You have to believe in yourself. And right now his confidence is so high, but there was no arrogance. There was no smugness. There was no, hey, what do you think about me now? Hey, how's that 86 rating? There's none of that, right? Just a really sweet, salt of the earth kid. He put on 25 pounds over the last year, and you see a noticeable jump in arm talent. And people will always say, including us, hey, it's not always about arm strength, but arm strength, it's kind of a big deal, right? And you're able to do things and make throws that a normal quarterback can't make if you have some extra juice in that arm. And I think watching Bryson, man, he had some throws that were just, between the safety and the corner, or these tight windows, or rolling out and just kind of gunning it with a little bit of a sidearm sling action that most guys can't even make or would even attempt. So arm talent checks the box. He's a better athlete than I think people know about. He's got that long kind of I kind of call it almost like a basketball body, where he's long but loose and fluid, and just mentally he's so sharp. And he had a big junior season, and that's kind of what started the thing rolling. And I hate honestly, that not to disrespect Oregon fans, I hate the fact that his ranking went up after, or kind of coincided with
the same day. I think the same day, Greg.
And it wasn't. I mean, we talked about it at Elite 11. I'm like, okay, do we want to bump him now? We knew he was good. And at Elite 11, we're like, okay, this is going to happen. And it just worked out where it had to be the same day. And we're like, shoot, because I love Boise State. And honestly, they're going to probably roll their eyes. But if he was committed to Boise State, he would be rated the exact same spot. And I just hate the way it looked, where all of a sudden all these other schools, and now it looks like, oh, Boise State, they get no love. The reality was Boise State did a great job, obviously, early evaluating this guy. And everybody was kind of late to the party. But unfortunately, for Boise State and schools that are sometimes non-Power 4, you miss out. You lose out on the schools. I mean, this kid had Bama that was after him. He had some major programs. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin knows a little bit about quarterback play, right? So huge pickup for Oregon. I think he is extremely talented, and I love the way it lines up. I'm a big Dante Moore fan. I think Dante's 3 and out. I think he's going to be really, really good. And then after that, you got some guys you took last year, KJ, and now you bring in Bryson. I think it's going to be a fun competition, but I think things lined up really well. And, I'm sure Oregon fans were kind of disappointed maybe to lose Jonas early on, and then Ryder Lyons, there was some buzz with there. But Bryson Beaver, I mean, ultimately he might be the best guy.
Yeah, I like the way you put that there at the end, because it has been a weird quarterback cycle. You mentioned those two. Jared Curtis was another name Oregon was attached to. Yeah. Some of these 5 stars, higher rated guys. And like you say, these are not linear development, and it's possible Beaver ends up being just as good, if not better, than some of these guys. I gave a shades of, you got something.
Just to add, and I want you to finish your thought first. So go ahead, and then I'll just finish. Let me just jump in. One thing about Bryson, he is a interesting case because he's old. California, we call them California holdbacks. A lot of players in California are older, and especially quarterback position. A lot of these guys are holdbacks, and some are even double holdbacks. And so Bryson's one of the older quarterbacks, and it's something that we kind of frown on. But the thing with Bryson is he's a late developer, meaning a lot of these guys in California, they look like grown men in 8th grade. And then from the time they're 8th grade freshmen, they do not progress from a physical standpoint. Bryson is a late developer. So even though he's a little older for the grade, he's a guy who, like I said, physically, he's put on 20 pounds. He's still growing. He's still got like baby face. He doesn't look like he's physically matured. And so that's why I think another reason why we like him is because even though, he might be older, he's still going up. He's not peaked like so many guys out here who, like I said, a lot of California quarterbacks who are, 16-year-old 8th graders, we joke. And they're already peaked. Bryson he's still going up. He's still trending up. So we're excited about that as well.
I was just going to ask, we talked about player comps earlier. I said shades of Bo Nix. Again, try not to make the comparison one-on-one because fans will say, oh, he's going to be a top 10 pick now. Not what I'm suggesting, but just like some of the movement skills and some of the ability to throw off platform, different arm angles, some of that. I don't know. That was just something that I saw. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys had picked up on or noticed, or maybe now that I brought it up, you'll see it under that lens a little bit. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't have a great one for him, honestly, because I feel like, again, he's such a different player now, but that's not a bad one. I will say this, when I saw Bo in high school, and I think we might have been a little bit lower on him because I didn't see a high level arm. We kind of thought, and again, I know it has a negative connotation, but with Bo, we kept saying, game manager, right? And I think everyone, they hate that. It's like telling a pitcher, hey, you got a good changeup, but you got no fastball. And no one wants to hear that. So, but Bo was a guy, he never wowed you with arm talent. And then, even at Auburn, the knock was, hey, you can't rip the football down the field. He's more of a dink and dunk guy. And then even at Oregon, I think people said that, right? He doesn't throw it with Michael Penix. And that was obviously an Oregon-Washington thing, but it's funny. In the NFL, man, all of a sudden the guy's got some juice to him. But I will say this, I always use this kind of at the same stage in their development. So I'm not comparing Bryson to Bo Nix right now, who's in the NFL. I think coming after their junior season, Bryson's got more arm talent than Bo Nix did. He's able to throw it, spins it better, and he ropes it better, more on a line, just got more velocity than Bo at the same stage in their development. So, but I do like the Bo Nick, similar frame, better athletically, both can move around and make plays with their legs, but just from a pure arm standpoint, I think Bryson's got him beat for right now in terms of just that arm talent.
Let's kind of do maybe a condensed version of, you mentioned earlier you were on with Canzano and trying to explain why Oregon's class wasn't in the top 10. I think at the time they were probably in the 40s or something because they'd been number one. They'd fallen back with some decommits. There's just so much movement. Like, how would you, Greg, describe this cycle for Oregon? It's been kind of a funny one.
Yeah. So it sounds weird. I didn't even pay attention to it. Like, I didn't know Oregon was where they were rated until John brought it up. And then I looked and I'm like, oh, well, do we care? Because Bama's not in the top 30 and UCLA is. And that's not a knock on UCLA. But I'm saying there's just from a West Coast standpoint, I'm looking at who's doing what and seeing, Sac State at one point was in the top 50. And then they've lost like 5 guys in the last couple of weeks. I don't worry about it. I don't even think about it right now. And even like USC's rolling, you never know until they actually start playing some games. Guys, are going to come and go. And obviously NIL is different. There's actually, now guys are signing deals. And so I think that kind of locks the player in maybe more so than it did previously. And if they do want to decommit and they signed a deal under the table, they got to pay that money back. So I'm curious if we'll see less flips now than we did prior to NIL, because if guys are already signing deals, they don't want to lose out on that money that they've already been collecting. But when I saw Oregon was so low, I didn't even blink. I wasn't thinking, oh man, that's kind of I just kind of assumed, hey, they're going to finish in the top 10 eventually. That my first thought was they're going to be in the top 10 in December. So who cares where they're at right now? I get if you're a fan and you're used to seeing them doing maybe better early on and you're kind of comparing it to previous years, I get why there might be some consternation, but I didn't even blink.
Well, and I'll just add this for fans listening and wondering, kind of doing a comparison to last year. I was just looking this up. Last year on the 4th of July, Oregon landed Corian Moore, jumped to number 5 nationally. Oregon's at 15 right now, and like there are a couple commitments from being pretty close to that range. Like it's all kind of muddled up. They got, we talked about earlier, Tofi and Keli this week, and they moved up like 16 spots, just 2 commitments of again, not even like the 5-star, class pillar guys. So movement is very fluid here. And I like Greg said, I don't think we measure in June, just like you wouldn't measure a football game at halftime. You'd still want to watch the second half of it play out. Kind of last question here for you. I'm just curious on, I'm going to ask you about a couple wide receivers that are currently committed to Ohio State. And if you think there's any chance, just because I know fans have been very curious about Chris Henry Jr., Caden Dixon-White, a couple of teammates down at Mater Day. What are you hearing there? Are they all just locked in for the Buckeyes? And part of the reason I ask is Oregon is, I think, still kind of trying to figure out what their game plan is at receiver this cycle.
It does sound like it. They both. It's funny. It's a newer thing now where people are doing edits to announce that they're still committed. I don't know if you noticed
you're right.
that. I used to joke. We're seeing edits for guys announcing where they're going to JUCO, and we're seeing edits now when they're high school transferring from going to this high school now. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's not a shock to see people announcing an edit saying, "Hey, I'm still committed. I'm locked in." I just saw Chris over the weekend. There's a big passing tournament out here. He wasn't working out. He was recently cleared. He had the knee injury, but he wasn't working out. But he sounded like he was pretty locked in for Ohio State. I didn't see Caden. He was out in Florida for the overtime OT7 event. But it sounded like he's pretty locked in as well. Now, will both those guys end up at Ohio State? You never know. But at this point, I would say they seem very confident in their decision. I don't expect Ohio State to have the kind of season where players are going to jump off the ship. I think Ohio State, when it comes to receivers, they do a pretty good job with developing receivers over there. So as of right now, I think they both sound like they're very confident in their decisions.
Okay, fair enough. I'd ask it, maybe a little catnip for the Oregon fans who are just kind of, I think, curious about where this is headed at receiver, even though I know Messiah Hampton just committed, Jalen Lott, someone they're involved in, and that sounds like there's a decision coming here in the next week or so. Greg, unless you got any other,
and something like Lott just killed it at the recent Big Texas event, and so I mean that would be huge. And not Jet Washington, another guy who committed to Oregon. Love, he's one of my favorite players out west. He just killed it at the overtime 7. So, I think even when Oregon was rated low, the quality of the player they're bringing in still extremely high. Now you're kind of bringing in more numbers, but they got the right guys. And like I said, the quality of the class is excellent. Love Jet. Love what they're doing. Love the running backs. I think it's going to be special for sure.
Well, can I ask you one more follow-up on Jet because we haven't talked to him.
Yeah.
So is he a safety or a linebacker ultimately? Is that the big question for him?
He's so big. I mean, right. He's literally, you see him in person and you like, he's 6'5", and a real 6'5". A lot of people who are 6'5" or 6'3". He is a massive kid, and probably the easy, maybe his lazy comp would be Isaiah Simmons, who played for Clemson, who played, he played safety, he played linebacker, he played all over the place. I kind of see Jet, though, being able to do similar things. Again, why I like him so much is he does everything well. He's got range and ball skills. When I first went to a Bishop Gorman showcase, he was playing receiver. And I was like, Jet, you like receiver? He goes, yeah, this is what I want to play. It's like when he was a sophomore. And then, he's got that athleticism. Receivers, you got to be pretty fluid and you can't be, super stiff. You got to be mobile. And so he's got that. He's got ball skills. And then you watch him play, the aggressiveness that he comes downhill. And every game he played last year, he was knocking somebody out. Not out of the game, but he was coming downhill and he was unloaded on guys. So I'm a big fan of that. Not getting guys hurt, but I'm a big fan of a guy who gets downhill, a little old school safety mentality, right? So he can hit, he can play in space, he can cover, he can range sideline to sideline. He's got great ball skills. He's a smart kid. He's a highly competitive kid. Didn't play basketball this past season, but elite basketball player. Could play basketball in college. He won't, but he could if he wanted to. Don't even need to mention the bloodlines. Everyone knows, Kobe's nephew. He is a total package. And for me, if I was to use him, I would play him as an outside linebacker. I think he can have the biggest impact playing close to the line of scrimmage. He can cover backs and tight ends. You can rush him off the edge. Again, playing in space, impact the run game. He can cover. He can blitz. His impact there, I think, would be better than just playing him as a deep safety, where you can impact it as well as you can closer to the line of scrimmage. But he could play safety. He's big enough to be an edge rusher, honestly, if you put on 25 pounds. But I like him as an outside backer personally.
Yeah, he's a weird one because I was talking to friends about this because they saw the Kobe headline. They're asking like, okay, who is this kid? And I was like, he's listed as a safety, but he just wallops guys. And like, you kind of wonder like, could he play closer to the line of scrimmage? And it's pretty unique to see a safety outside linebacker hybrid, you know, as being a projected player. So certainly an intriguing player there.
Brian Urlacher, right? If we're going to old school, he was New Mexico. He played safety, and he was massive, and he was going to be a linebacker in the pros. But not a lot of them. Like I said, Isaiah Simmons is probably the one that jumps to mind because Clemson, he was so good there and moved around. But I definitely think you love to have a guy who's versatile. Like getting him is like getting 3 players in one. So I think you love that positional flexibility that he brings.
Awesome. Hey, Greg, thank you so much for your time. We'll wrap it up there. You go find all of Greg's work over here at 24/7 Sports. He is a huge asset for the site. So we'll be signing off right now. Thank you, Greg.
Yep, you got it.